Hello, YouTube family! It's time to sit back, relax, and prepare for a video collection that will have you on the edge of your seat. We scan the internet for the funniest, most shocking, and bizarre videos available. Take a moment to settle in, unwind, and prepare yourself to embark on an awe-inspiring journey. Remember to subscribe and activate that notification bell, for you wouldn't want to miss our stories. So have your popcorn ready and prepare to be amused. What is a seemingly mundane question you can ask somebody that will tell you a lot about their personality? This seems like a great prompt for therapists, people interviewing for new jobs, or just someone going on a first date. I'm pretty curious to see how much psychoanalysis can actually be done from just a single question. Let's see what creative ways people have devised to hack into other people's brains. Story 1. What was the last thing you did that gave you childlike joy? My 14-year-old asked for a longboard last spring. I'd said no before because I figured it'd be something I spend a few $100 on that she'd try once, not be good at right away, and never touch it again. It wouldn't be the first time. After being locked up for 2 months with quarantine, I figured, why not? It gets her outside and maybe something she'll enjoy. At that point, I just wanted to get her out of her room and off her phone. I'd never seen her work so hard at something she wasn't good at right away. After 2 back-to-back 6-hour days of practice, she started to get the hang of it and asked me if I wanted to try. I couldn't even stand on a board when I was a kid, but as an adult, I just got it. I wasn't on it for 5 minutes, and I said, I need one. We left right then and picked one up for myself. We cruised all spring, summer, and fall. Not only was it great for bonding, I hadn't felt that kind of joy since I was little. A moment I'll never forget. Can't wait for the snow to melt. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. First, I'm impressed that she practiced for so many hours. Second, I love that you got it and wanted to go get one so you could do it together. And I said, I need one. More like, get your own, Dad. You've been hogging it all day. This sounds so stupid to type out, but dancing, like actually dancing by myself in the mirror. Feeling the beat and just being silly. Super therapeutic. 10 out of 10 would recommend to just let loose. I found this old pair of stick-on nails with little cats that had googly eyes, so I got my sister to help me put them on with the help of some nail glue. Listened to Rainbow Connection by Kermit the Frog on Spotify last Friday. Just reading this gave me joy. Does playing with my son count? He's a child who frequently exhibits childlike joy, of which I am a symbiotic parasite. That seems kind of like cheating at this question. Story 2. My father-in-law went to a job interview about 10 years ago and absolutely nailed the interview. As he was being shown around the office, a high-level person in the company, who normally wasn't there, just happened to be there that day. After they were introduced, he asked my father-in-law what kind of animal he would be. My father-in-law said he panicked and picked the bear. He's a bigger guy. And the other guy said something along the lines of, well, that's a little aggressive. Maybe this isn't the job for you. So he didn't get the job, but I guess it worked out because he's got a pretty good job now, and if I was him, I wouldn't want to work for someone who hires people based on what animal they think they would be. Well, that sounds like an awful place to work. If a company would kick you out for everything good but one minor choice, I don't think working there will be happy. Good bosses know the strengths and weaknesses of their colleagues, and one failure does not necessarily mean bad. The right answer was, I'd be a parasite that lives in your eye and eats away your optical nerves. Oh, you sound like you'd be good in management. The guy should have asked the follow-up question, why did you choose the bear? Because a bear is not always associated with an aggressive animal, but can also be associated with a tough-looking guy who really loves cuddles and is a sweetheart. The explanation says more about the person than a one-worded answer. This actually applies to a lot of answers. Wow, that is so messed up. That guy's a poohead. I bet the asker picked the bear himself and didn't want 2 bears in the same office. Yeah, that's a lame way to try to hire someone. I have a hard time thinking of any animal that is one-dimensional, so no matter what answer the father-in-law gave, it wouldn't really give any insight into his character, since any single given animal can be characterized in a variety of vastly different ways. Like, for instance, I'm an admirer of sheep, and sometimes they are portrayed as followers, like when people say, "Wake up, sheeple." But that's because they're envisioning domesticated sheep. In the wild, if you picture a bighorn ram, they are independent and stand their own ground. So you can't really generalize or stereotype animals into one category. Story 3. What's your favorite dinosaur? In my last year of college, I took a prehistoric history class and loved it. I, a history major, commuted by light rail to school and would end up spending the hour or so on the train congregating with other history majors. One day I asked this group, "What's your favorite dinosaur?" Most of the people gave answers like velociraptors, or that they hadn't really been interested in dinosaurs since they were kids, which was fair enough. But one guy said, "I don't believe in dinosaurs," and that the Earth was 6,000 years old. This was a guy that was studying history for the sake of teaching children history, and he was denying that most of the Earth's history didn't exist, despite learning otherwise in the classes he was specializing in. I lost a lot of respect for him that day, and now having a favorite dinosaur is a barometer test of mine. Triceratops. I saw this coming. Just recently learned that not believing in dinosaurs is an actual conspiracy theory that is commonly held. It reminds me of the first time I heard of the flat earth theory. I was in training on a job at a tech firm. In our orientation, we have to tell someone about something exciting we did. I go with a generic skydiving story, and he busts out, "Did you see the curve?" I was kind of dumbfounded, because the Earth is gigantic, and I said, "No." The next 10 minutes were him explaining how the Earth was flat. I couldn't believe it was a thing. Yet for the next year, I looked up everything I could find to try and validate how someone could believe it. Nope, just skepticism without serious critical thinking. He only lasted about 6 months in the job before he was gone. Story 4. What superpower they want. I know there are more powerful powers that could get me wealth or whatever, but man, teleportation would be dope. Can travel the world, but always sleep in your own bed and never need to book a flight. Never need to use a public restroom, easily visit family, only take road trips if I want, can live and work anywhere. The rest of life could be normal, but it'd be great. Work? Bro, teleport in and out of the bank vaults. I love this question because this girl I knew in college had just the best answer. She said, the power to fill things. And after I looked at her kind of funny, she said, like filling my bank account with money, filling my belly with spaghetti, or filling my enemies' bladders with urine. Bro, you should have married her. The power to create, change, and freely access my own personal pocket dimension. No rent, no property taxes, no carbon footprint. And you always have your entire living space with all of your stuff with you. You could be as nomadic or settled as you want. You'd never have to worry about natural or financial disasters making you homeless, and your commute to work wouldn't even exist unless you wanted it to. Distance would no longer be an obstacle between you and seeing your friends and family. The ability to change probability. You could theoretically control anything. What's the probability I'll ace this test? Make it 100%. What's the probability of me winning the lottery? 100%. What's the probability I'll finally catch Alice cheating on me? 100%. In the long run, success only matters if there is a possibility of failure. You'd eventually start forcing bad outcomes just to feel something again. And now you're a supervillain. Story 6. What would you do if you won the lottery? For me, it's a non-invasive way of listening to people's attitudes on finance in general, and also how they feel about the rich. Yes, this is a brilliant question. When I was newly dating my ex-boyfriend, it was around the time Super Lotto hit $1 billion a couple years ago. We were both in lottery ticket pools and discussed what we'd do if we won. His answer mortified me. It included how, if we were married, he'd divorce his wife and travel the world on a yacht, doing drugs surrounded by hot women. Big red flag for me. Wow, of all the things, that is definitely something you don't say to your girlfriend. I always say that I'd turn into an absolutely abhorrent degenerate if I were to suddenly get a cash prize like that, but in reality, I just say that because I get a laugh out of people's reactions from it. I don't even know what I'd do. Probably just quit working, find a music teacher, and play bass and video games all day long. First things first, I'm going to get a financial advisor. I'd have no idea what to do with that much money, and I don't want to end up a mess. Same here. My first thought about winning the lottery is, how do you go about finding a reliable financial advisor when you've just won the lottery and everybody is suddenly offering financial advice to you? I think I read somewhere that nearly a third or so of multi-million-dollar jackpot winners eventually declare bankruptcy, or sometimes they even end up worse. It's something of an open secret, actually, that winners of obnoxiously large jackpots, they tend to end up badly with alarming regularity. Not the $1 million winners, but more so anyone in like the 7, 8, or 9-figure range. Those people are at high risk. Perhaps this is a consequence of the sample, like the demographics of lottery players might be exactly the wrong people to win large sums of money. Or perhaps money is the root of all evil. Either way, you are going to have to be careful. Story 7. In a job interview, ask your prospective supervisor how much vacation time and sick days they took last year. This is great because both extremes take pride in their answer and so will answer honestly. The no or low vacation boss is proud of how hard she or he works, but really it's bad if they don't take time off. They're coming in when they're sick, they're not recharging by taking vacation, and the expectation, even if unstated, is that their staff should follow that example. You'll feel guilty every time you call in sick or take vacation time. You want the boss who says, "I always take my vacation time and encourage my staff to as well. I called in a couple times last year when I came down with a cold. Good boss." Have you ever had a negative reaction when you ask this? I can see a scenario where the prospective supervisor is a little private about this. Could it be seen as too personal of a question to ask? I'm not playing devil's advocate or advocating to not ask. I'm actually curious as someone who's hoping to be interviewing for positions in the near future. If you want to play it safe, you can ask how many days a year on average the employees here take off. Story 8. It's not a single question, but by the second or third date with a guy, I would ask him to go bowling. As it turns out, there's many ways to play the game. Do they take it too seriously and get competitive or angry if they don't do well? Does he act disinterested or bored of the game? Do they try to teach me how to play, or do they just try to be goofy and have fun with it? Do they order 2 pitchers of beer and get totally smashed? In my opinion, you can learn a lot about a person by the way they approach bowling. This isn't Nam, this is bowling. There are rules. Donnie, you're out of your element. Story 9. One of my standard job interview questions is, tell me about something you like doing that you're good at. I don't really care what the answer is. I just want to see passion, effort, and creativity. Tell me what you're good at. Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Rolls the dice. No. I'm glad you asked. Pulls out campaign notes, PHB, blank character sheet, 3 friends, pencils, dice, mat, dry erase markers, Cheetos, and Mountain Dew. Gary, put the dice away or I'm taking them. Well, I have things I like to do, but I'm not good at any of them. I like to return shopping carts to their corral. I don't really care what the answer is. Phew, thank God for that, because my answer is going down on your mom. Have you ever been part of a significant moment in someone's life and not found out until much later? Story 1. Here is the story of the man who saved my life without ever knowing it. I was 22, just recently kicked out of college, moved back in with my parents, and was going to the local community college while working as a clerk at the Chicago Board of Trade. Now, my CBOT job gave me access to tons of great stuff, money for school, connections in Chicago, but mostly drugs. Every drug I ever wanted, the best prices, and the best quality. I took great advantage of this. To say I was depressed would be putting it mildly. I hated myself. I hated everything about me and what I had become. Let me take you through a typical day. Wake up at 3 a.m. and take the train to work. Eat painkillers and a Red Bull for breakfast. Get yelled at on the trading floor until 5 or 6 p.m., eat more painkillers, go to school from 7 to 11 p.m., eat more painkillers, go home, play video games, and eat more painkillers. Repeat. Repeat this every freaking day until the weekend came. The weekends weren't much different. I would simply add cocaine into the mix and stay up all night downing painkillers and snorting at minimum a gram or two of coke by myself. I was miserable. Adding my habitual cutting routine in the mix, and I can easily say this was the lowest point in my life. I thought about seppuku almost every day, and really can't explain how much I hated being me. Then one day, I bumped into a friend from high school. We literally walked into each other while I was going from work to class. We were never great friends before, but he was always a great guy. We ended up grabbing coffee and agreed to see a movie next week. At this point, I had not hung out with anyone I would consider a friend in about 8 months. I was super excited. A friend, someone to talk to. We ended up having a great bromance night out. Movies and hot wings, it was awesome. I was actually happy. From then on, every week we would either see or rent a movie. I can't really explain why, but this changed me. I started caring about myself again. I started trying harder in school. I slowed and eventually stopped using drugs, and I didn't feel the need to cut anymore. To this day, he has no idea that he literally saved my life. I've never really explained to anyone the massive impact he had on my life, and putting it all down like this is really causing me to tear up. Story 2. When I was in middle school, we had a big end-of-school dance. This was during the time of silk shirts for the guys and poofy sleeves for the girls, about mid-90s. During said dance, a girl who I knew but was not into asked me to dance. Because my mom raised me right, I knew what kind of courage it took for her to do that, especially at that awkward age. We danced, probably to Boys to Men or something, and that was that. No biggie in my mind. About 20 years later on Facebook, she hits me with this. So I had this random memory of you yesterday and felt like I should share it for some crazy reason. Please don't think I'm nuts. For some reason, the memory of you dancing with me at the 8th grade dance entered my brain. I'm sure it's because Mother's Day is approaching. At that time was when my mom was really sick, and it was obvious that she wouldn't be here much longer. The day after the dance, my family and I went to visit her in the hospital. When it was just the two of us in her room, she asked me if I danced with someone. When I told her that I danced with you, she was so happy. She knew how big of a crush I had on you in middle school. As I thought about it, I realized that it was probably the last happy memory I had with her. It was soon after that she became sicker and passed away a few weeks later. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for giving that to me. My mind was blown. Thanks for teaching me unconditional respect, Mom. Story 3. As a lifelong hospitality worker, going out of my way for people is pretty ingrained in my personality, and I regularly forget what an impact just being nice to people can have. On one particular night, we had a reservation for a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and they let us know in advance that the wife was in a wheelchair. No biggie. I arranged a table that was easy to access and equally close to the entrance and the bathroom, and removed a chair so that when they arrived, they didn't have to go over these things. It can be embarrassing to have people make a fuss over you and your condition, so doing these things in advance helps. It turns out the wife wasn't just in a wheelchair, she was quadriplegic. All she could move was her face. Even her neck was in a brace. Her husband was incredible. Patient, attentive, loving. At the beginning of the meal, he ordered for her. He cut her food and fed her before he touched his plate. When I would come by the table to see how they were doing, I tried to include her in the conversation, ask her questions, but her husband would always answer for her. It was like we were chatting through a translator. After their mains, I brought over the dessert menu and was talking them through the available options when I heard the wife murmur. Clearly she was struggling to speak, so I leaned in and she asked me if we had any cheese. I explained to her the available selection, and when I brought it over, gave a story about each of the cheeses in turn. It feels strange to be discussing these little details because they're just run-of-the-mill things. The point is, at the end of the night, they left, smiling, and both thanked me for a lovely night. A couple of weeks later, my manager gave me a letter the husband had written to me. Not unusual. Customers often write in afterwards to say thank you, but I choked up reading it. Apparently, the wife had been quadriplegic for a couple of decades by that point, and for nearly that long they had spent their time alone, just the two of them, rarely leaving the house. The occasions when they did, they had been treated as a nuisance by the general public, and it was so disillusioning to them that they became reclusive. The wife especially, who had not said a word to anyone outside family or doctors in over 10 years. He closed the letter by thanking me for the humanizing experience, a truly special anniversary gift, and that they now looked forward to enjoying many more nights like that one after having missed out on so many. It really takes so little effort to just acknowledge someone, and yet it can clearly make the world of a difference. I think a lot of us realized pretty quickly during the pandemic that human interaction is so critical to our living experience, and without it, some of us just really suffer. So if you take anything from this story, I'd say hold on to the bonds that you have and just try your best not to let them fade. It's easy to become isolated as we get older, but it's definitely worth the extra effort to maintain relationships wherever possible. You just never know what the other person on the other end is feeling. Story 4. A friend of mine who moved away a couple of years ago actually messaged me on Facebook the other day about how I saved her life. She explained that she was anorexic in middle school when we were good friends, and there was one particular day that changed her outlook on life. It was teriyaki chicken day, best freaking lunch of the year, and she said she wasn't going to have any, wasn't hungry. I refused to take that answer because, holy frick, teriyaki chicken! I pulled her up to the line and made her eat her chicken, rice, fortune cookie, and drink her chocolate milk. She told me that she went home that day and cried, finally realizing that someone did care. She said, "You probably saved my life that day. I just know how you changed me that day. I have to let you think about it every time I feel down." I cried so hard, tearing up a bit, now remembering her message. I had no idea. I'm so glad 11-year-old me did that, because she's a beautiful, wonderful person, studying biology at a great school, living life to its fullest now. She's on the internet too, so Allie, if you're hearing this, I'm so glad you told me, and I hope you're doing well. Story 6. I dated a 28-year-old girl when I was 22. She was divorced with a 6-year-old. I was obviously too young to deal with a 6-year-old, but tried to hang out with the kid as much as I could. His mom was a bit technically challenged, so I set up their PC, brought him some of my games, upgraded their PC from time to time with spare parts from my PC, etc. We finally broke up, and I thought that was that. Cue 10 years later, I see her on Facebook, do the friend thing, and she asks if she can call me. Sure, why not? We speak for a bit, and she asks if her son can speak to me. He's now 16 and has a few things to say to me. Me and the son speak for about an hour, and hour in, which he profusely thanks me for the times I spent with him and his PC games. Because of me, he has gotten completely into building his own PCs and building the PCs of his friends at school. He loves gaming and says it reminds him of me. Never felt so honored and so horrified at the same time. Directionless, immature 22-year-old me did something to change the course of someone's life. Made me think twice when dealing with people after that. This one almost gets into the territory of, the butterfly effect, a concept that depicts how even the tiniest events can lead to a cause and effect chain of events that eventually drastically changes the world as we know it. Like, for instance, a butterfly flapping its wings on one side of the world leads to a series of subsequent events that ends in a typhoon on the other side of the world. This guy's actions exemplify this in a way, and it's important for us all to realize that no matter what we do with our lives, big or small, we are for sure leaving a mark and having an impact and shaping history just by being here. Story 7. I knew it was significant, but I didn't realize how. Years back, I arrested a guy for some child offenses. He was an older guy, had a couple of older daughters and a younger one, and was married. He and his wife had been together 20-something years. The guy was in great shape and had a very active job. His wife was less attractive. She had put on weight since the marriage and had kind of let herself go a bit. Incredibly sweet woman. So we arrested Dad. The daughters are crying, weepy. "We love you, Dad." So's the wife. Not in a crappy way, just broken up. As the case winds its way through the courts, it becomes clear that Dad's defense is, My wife got fat and ugly, so it's her fault I had to do that kind of stuff to the kids. Not only was that his defense, but it was what his parents and family believed. Basically, it's all the wife's fault, and his decision to play around with little kids is totally innocent. In addition, he spent the 2 or 3 years before his arrest online chatting with other pedos and telling them what a fat, ugly witch he married. Scum. The prosecutor and I stayed in touch with the wife through the process, explaining to her what was going on, advising her of her options, making sure she understood what was going on. We gave her advance notice that he was going to try this stuff, that he was saying evil, nasty things about her, rather than taking responsibility for his actions. And more importantly, that no one was buying it, and no one blamed her for that matter. A couple years after that case went to bed, I was out in the suburbs doing a safety talk to a group of parents. The wife happened to be there, and came up to me before the talk. She told me, for the first time, that he'd been somewhat mentally abusive in the years leading up to the arrest. She'd never quite felt like she was good enough to leave him, if that makes sense. She told me that the prosecutor and I had given her the strength she needed to leave him, and to cut him out of their lives. We kept telling her that it wasn't her fault, and that she was better than he was, and it was what she needed to get out of there. It was a little reminder that a small thing, handling a victim properly, can have lasting repercussions. What everyday skill is suspicious if you're too good at it? Story 1. I once had a neighbor catch me while I was taking groceries out of my car and ask if I knew how to open locked doors, as they had locked themselves out by mistake. Went over to their door, took out a credit card, and shimmied my way in no more than 5 seconds. Probably was bittersweet for them. My boss locked herself out of the shop last week, and I did this. We are getting new locks and a new security system now. But if you had told her how easy it was a week ago, she wouldn't have given a care at all. Seeing is believing. Story 2. Not me, but someone I know once mentioned to me back in their high school days they were suspected of being a snitch because they would always be inclined to leave right before the bust happened. It wasn't that the guy was a snitch, he'd say that sometimes he just got a feeling, or he knew when a party was just dead. Some sort of sixth sense of his. Every time he got around to leaving, his buddies would usually follow suit, since they were usually the ones dealing anyways. I'm typically not very good at goodbyes at parties myself, and that's coming from a guy raised in an Italian family with lots of relatives. So family gatherings were tricky when trying to find every last person to bid farewell. Luckily, there is a sliver of Irish in me as well, so I tried the Irish goodbye on occasion, which feels great in the moment when you can slip away unnoticed, but then always feel guilty afterwards. So now my latest method, which can be quite challenging as an introvert, is to just loudly announce to anyone within earshot, "I'm leaving now. Thanks for everything. Bye." Seems to be effective so far, and is just like ripping off a Band-Aid to get it over with quickly. Story 3. A couple of years ago, I locked my keys in my car in a Walmart parking lot. I went in and asked if they could help me. 2 employees came out with a jimmy. The one guy made a bet with the other that he could unlock my car in under a minute. He then proceeded to unlock my car in 15 seconds. I told him, "Thanks, you must have a lot of practice," to which he laughed and walked away. Story 4. So by an incidental combination of being a gearhead and, at one time, a tow truck driver, I am a little more observant when it comes to cars than most. I also have a knack for numbers and memorize things unintentionally. I've stopped mentioning to people that I saw their car somewhere or other, the movies for example. It's awkward explaining that I know your plate and can spot your piece of crap Sentra from across the parking lot. Story 5. Butchering. I work professionally with raptors, the feathered kind, not the clever girl kind, and for a while I was prepping on average 15 quail a day, from frozen thawed to plucked and gutted and portioned. It's useful in the kitchen too, for ducks, turkey, chicken. I've also processed venison before. Then when people find out that I work in a landfill, I fly the raptors to keep the gulls out. They are suddenly afraid to make me mad.
I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you are looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills I have acquired over a very long career. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you let my daughter go now, that'll be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you. But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you, and I will kill you.
Story 6. Walking silently. It's always a good skill to have to be able to be quiet in a moment's notice, but do it too well and you start appearing behind people and freaking them out. How long have you been there? Type things. My significant other's parents' house has hardwood floors that everyone just stomps around on. I don't like making noise when I walk, so according to them, I sneak around their house and scare them unintentionally sometimes. Story 7. I look at license plates. I don't know why, but it's every day for me. But for some reason, I pretty much had the license plate of the girl I liked memorized. It was easy to remember, and we worked the same place together every day, so I saw it a lot. One time, I almost slipped and said, "Hey, were you driving out over in X place today?" and almost mentioned that the truck's license plate looked just like hers. Story 8. I once went to a science convention thingy, and they had a rectoscopy simulator there. It was this camera snake cable thing that you fed into a butthole in the machine, and a screen showed a fake camera feed from the tunnel, a colon. I got such a good score that the woman at the booth said, "You must have done this before." Edit. I guess it's called colonoscopy. Anyway, the most embarrassing high score. A great adventure is waiting for you ahead. Hurry onward, lemmywinks, or you will soon be dead. The journey before you may be long and filled with woe, but you must escape the gay man's butt, or your tale cannot be told. Story 9. Apparently knowing drug names. I once told somebody that they could mix ibuprofen and acetaminophen because they don't mess with each other, and they thought I was a drug dealer for the longest time, shaking my head. Yes, why do people think this is so weird? I'm not going to learn 30 brand names when they have one chemical name, unless there's something special about one brand over the other in terms of effectiveness. Story 10. Cleaning blood from things. Every woman, especially moms, should have some ability here, but be able to help someone clean up after an accident or injury and get surprised looks and side eyes. Hubby's in the EGA branch of the U.S. military. Within a month of being married, his whole shop was bringing bloodied uniforms to our house. Screw touch football and kitchen accidents, read shenanigans, but thank goodness for baking soda. Story 11. Noticing details about people. I've moved around a lot and have worked in a lot of industries, one being in tourism. If I'm a tour guide and I notice a particular brand of clothing and ask someone if they're from a particular place and am right, it's me being observant and leads to a fun discussion. If I do the same thing in line of getting coffee, it's considered creepy. Story 12. Interrogating someone without them knowing. I was at a school thing and one of my girl classmates really liked a guy, but was too nervous to talk to him. She asked me to figure out some of his info, and I ended up getting first name, last name, school, hobbies, and grade level. She was happy, but more than a little creeped out about how casually I did it. Cashiers. What products make you silently judge the persons who buy them? Story 1. I'm a clerk at a convenience store. Not something I judge harshly for, just something I've noticed and I think is funny. Teenagers buying condoms. Most adults buying condoms just come in, grab the condoms, pay for them, and leave. Most people are getting intimate with other people, and adults realize that no one cares. Teenagers buying condoms are super awkward about it though. Typical scenario, a couple comes in, they look like they're about 15 or 16, the girl hangs out by the front door, looking around awkwardly or just staring at her phone. The boy will walk up and down the candy aisle, candy on one side, health and beauty stuff on the opposite side, pretending to look at candy, but keeps looking at the condoms to try to see what the selection is, without looking like he's looking at condoms. Bonus awkwardness if he texts his girlfriend to ask her opinion while she's standing right in front of me waiting. He'll then grab the absolute cheapest piece of candy he can find and a box of Trojan Fire and Ice every time. The way the kid wants it to look is I dragged my girlfriend down because I absolutely needed a single lemon head right this second, but I suppose I'll grab condoms while I'm here. Then after one of them pays, they'll quickly walk away with their heads huddled together, acting like they just got away with something. I always want to tell them that they don't have to treat it like something shady or dirty, and that no one gives a care. But I'm happy they're using protection at least. And I worry that even mentioning it would embarrass them enough to risk not coming in next time. Story 2. Too long didn't read. While being a cashier, I questioned why someone would subject themselves to itchy fabrics. As a teenager, I was judged for buying condoms that were a reason other than sex. The only time I can remember having a thought about a customer was when they bought our camouflage print lingerie with pink edging. I honestly could care less if they wanted to buy it, even though I thought it was hideous. But while folding it, I couldn't get over how itchy the fabric was. I was curious about why someone would subject themselves to that. My shopping habits were judged by a cashier when I was 14. My music teacher sent me to the store for unlubricated condoms. They were a way of keeping actors' sweat from damaging body microphones. It was a small town, and the cashier knew me. She was horrified about what I was buying, and before I could explain, she insisted on calling my mother to let her know that I was getting jiggy with it. I then got to explain in a very loud voice that I was still pure and they were for the microphones. Even if I had been buying them for doing intimate stuff, I would think the smarter move on her part would be to sell them to me. If teenagers have decided to do that stuff, then they're going to do it regardless of how adults feel. Public shaming and denying them protection is not going to stop it, but can lead to other consequences. Both the teacher involved and myself are females. Story 3. I got judged by a cashier once. I was working in a welding and fabrication facility at the time as a repair guy. Since I wasn't one of the welders, I would often get tasked with whatever needed doing. The particular job at the time required ultrasonic testing of bends made of some tubing to ensure proper wall thickness. We had one tube of ultrasound gel. Sure enough, the tube got knocked off the table and run over by a forklift. The job was very time critical, and we need to do the ultrasounds now. A good substitute for ultrasonic gel is KY. I grabbed a fistful of petty cash and rushed over to a nearby grocery store and grabbed every tube of KY they had. I then ran up to the cashier, who then rang up tube after tube after tube. I was in such a rush that I really hadn't thought about the normal use of KY. As she was looking at me oddly and silently ringing up my purchase, I said something like, it's been crazy at work today. The look on her face was priceless. Halfway out of the parking lot, I realized what happened. We all had a good laugh about it at work, and I had the nickname of KY for a few days. Story 4. Not a cashier, but I learned the other day that apparently you get judged for buying alcohol at 7 a.m. The cashier was pretty vocal about it, and if I wasn't so non-confrontational, I would have told the manager. She flat out said something along the lines of, "It's a little too early for boozing up, don't you think?" 1, none of your business if I'm drinking early in the morning. 2, it was on sale during a routine trip to get milk and such. Am I supposed to just leave it and come back after 5 p.m. to buy my alcohol? However, when I got home, I realized how my entire purchase looked. I got milk, chocolate milk, Lunchables, also on sale, and a strawberry daiquiri. She probably thought I had kids or something, so I understand her concern, kind of. She didn't have to say anything, though. It really struck a nerve. Edit, for those asking if she was joking, maybe. Her tone didn't sound very jokingly, but I may be wrong. Either way, alcoholism is a serious thing, and it kind of strikes a nerve when it's implied in such a manner. If it was obvious she was joking around, I wouldn't have gotten so upset over it, but her tone really did make it feel offensive. I worked as a cashier for a few years in high school, and store policy, or maybe it was statewide policy, was that we could not sell alcohol before 8 a.m. In reality, at least with the demographic at this particular store, it wasn't preventing alcoholics from buying drinks. It was just inconveniencing people prepping for their evening or weekend parties by forcing them to make another trip to the store later on in the day. I had many a customer get angry at me for this policy when it was like 7:55 in the morning and they were forced to wait 5 extra minutes. I might be misremembering this, but I think there was a time in Sweden, maybe, where you could only buy alcohol during the week, so that you were forced to plan out your weekends and avoid spontaneous overconsumption. Not sure if that's true, but it sounds brutal to me if so. Story 5. I didn't judge, but it's a great story. I saw a guy in the condom aisle looking absolutely baffled. I'm a pharmacist and went to help. With an inward sigh, some people have no idea how to use them. He said, "I have no idea what I'm looking at. There are so many. I've been fixed for almost 20 years, but my boy's going to college and I don't want him bringing STDs or any babies home with him." He got really excited when I told him about spermicide and bought 5 to 6 dozen count boxes. That's a good dad. Okay, quick story. I have an ultra-conservative Asian mom who never ever even mentioned this kind of stuff with me ever. When I got out of boot camp to my first duty station, everyone was getting care packages from home. Cookies, civilian clothes, etc. I got one from my mom. It was about 100 condoms, assorted boxes, with a note, "Please be safe, and we will never talk about this package. Love, Mom." Story 6. This isn't exactly the same thing, but I used to work at AutoZone. One day, a customer came in and asked if there were any deals on our strongest antifreeze. I asked him if he meant the lowest temperature rating, and he said no, the one with the most ethylene glycol. I was really confused and asked him what he needed it for, and he told me it was because his neighbor's kids just got kittens and they were trespassing on his property. I excused myself and went back to my boss, the store manager, and told him, and he told me I had to make the sale. I had to sell him 4 gallons of antifreeze to end the life of some defenseless kittens and absolutely crush his neighbor's kids. I try to never say I hate anybody and I never wish harm on anybody, but yeah. The new stuff is embittered by law, though not in all places, so the cats would have likely not gotten into it anyway. Story 7. A Vietnamese lady came in after the day of Valentine's Day to buy candy, and she bought hundreds of bags. I made a joke about how the dentist bill must be insane, and she told me how she sends the candy to orphan homes in Vietnam because they don't have candy there, apparently. Don't judge a book by its cover, guys. The story is true. Whether the lady lied or not, however, I don't know. But I'd like to believe that she's just a good person. I know a guy that purchases cases of water-based lube every other week to donate to homeless shelters. Story 8. Freshman year of high school, I was a cashier at a local grocery store. There was an upscale, organic cupcake boutique in town that sold their cupcakes for about $4 each. It was ridiculous, but people still bought them. Anyway, the owner would come in every other week and buy about 20 boxes of Betty Crocker cupcake mix and frosting. She must have had like a 2,000% rate of return on those things. Edit, the cupcake boutique has since gone out of business, and the lady was a witchy soccer mom in her mid-30s, so I doubt she was the confession on here, but it's interesting to know how common this apparently is. I seem to recall a confession here once where a woman told about how she made cupcakes at home with cupcake mix. All her friends kept telling her how good they were, and she should start a business. So she did. Now she was scared poopless that someone would discover her secret. Interesting conundrum. I don't actually know the laws on this one, but I imagine there's something about patents or intellectual property, so you can't just take an existing product like Betty Crocker cupcake mix and try to pass it off as your own for a premium price. But to what degree does this apply? Because most products are a combination of other products. So at what point do you cross a threshold into a new self-proclaimed product versus still leeching off the original? Like, can you add more ingredients to make it unique enough to qualify for its own patent on the new recipe? I suppose everything breaks down into natural goods and materials, and you can only claim ownership on a uniquely manufactured combination of those materials. This is clearly why I am not an IP lawyer. But there's some similar parallels with content creation and free use and what actually qualifies as a unique created content. Some interesting stuff there. Story 9. I worked as a cashier at Kmart once, and it was like my 3rd week there, and then this couple came into my line. They were buying lube, tissues, and condoms. As awkward as it was, I had to ring them up. Then, out of the complete blue, the guy asks me, "Hey, you should ask me what I'm going to do with these." My supervisor turns and looks me dead in the eyes as a literal ball of sweat drips from my brow. I'm awestruck. I continue to ring them out in silence. Then I say, I'd rather not. They both laugh at me, and I just continue to ring them out. Heavy judgment, because the chick was really hot. Kmart was my first job. I loved when Mexican dudes would come into my line with multiple packs of man thongs. Other than that, that job sucked. Story 10. I used to work at a Save-A-Lot as a cashier. Our client base tended to be a little lower on the economic ladder. At the first of the month, when the benefits get loaded to their cards, I always hated to see people push a cart up full of soda, chips, etc. These people also tended to usually be in poor health. I didn't really judge them, but I felt more pity for them. I also didn't like seeing people who would come in with the PIN number for their card on a piece of paper. It was a small town. I know that wasn't your card. I didn't hold it against the people who had the misappropriated card, but more against the people who sold their $300 worth of food stamps for $150 so they could buy alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, etc. The sad part was a lot of the people selling had kids. Story 11. Not a cashier either, but when my friend would buy Depends, you could tell the cashier and everyone in line would judge him hard. He was a 23-year-old college kid who still peed the bed when he drank. He tried his best, man. Edit, no, he didn't wear them to parties. He tried to remember to put them on when he drunkenly got home. This led to him putting them on backwards multiple times. This effectively kept his pee out of his diaper and in his bed. Once he forgot to put them on and brought a girl home, let's just say he convinced her that he drunkenly showered in the middle of the night. Her ride home must have been mortified. He's not my friend anymore. You've got to buy some stereotypical old people things with it and pretend you're doing your grandpa a favor. Story 12. Not a cashier, but I shop at Whole Foods. Invariably, there will be someone in front of me. She will have some $30 snake oil supplement and an overloaded container of prepared food, the kind where you pay by the pound. She will put out cash as she's rung up and realize that she doesn't have enough to cover both, so she takes the snake oil and leaves the food, which cannot be resold. I assume not only is she a moron for buying some BS supplement, but is hoping the cashier will let her keep the food once it's been voided, since it's going into the trash. As a former Whole Foods employee, these people are infuriating. Like I said, I was a cashier for a while, and I actually would disagree with this statement. Sure, if I was in the zone and it's a busy day and I'm just trying to get through the shift and pass the time, then I'm not really paying attention to you as a person. You're just another interchangeable entity that I interact with hundreds of times during the shift. Same as how they say that doctors don't care about seeing private aspects of their patients. But at least for me, like when it was slow and I was bored, then for sure my mind would wander about the customer and I'd have internal dialogue about what might be going on at their house or in their personal lives, anything to keep me entertained. Doing the same monotonous thing for 8 hours puts me in a weird mental state. Story 13. Every time this question comes up, I wonder what makes you think I think anything about you. I think about my feet hurting, my back aching, and how long until my shift ends. You? Not so much. I'm a cashier, and this is it. The only time I think about the customers is when they're doing something actually annoying. So if you're not licking your fingers before touching the bills, being super critical about how I do things, telling me the same stupid joke that I've already heard 5 times this shift, or anything generally annoying, I don't care what you buy. Story 14. The only time I really judged someone was when he came in and found a perfume he liked and bought 2. I said, it would probably be a good idea if you have 2 women in your life, thinking woman, mother, daughter, etc., to get them something different. He said, oh no, one is for my wife, the other for my girlfriend. If they wear the same perfume, I don't have to worry about my wife smelling my girlfriend's perfume on me. I mean, that is smart, but it's also really crummy. Story 15. Not a cashier, but I worked in fulfillment for Amazon for 4 years. I can't tell you how many times I checked out the name on the label for a shipment of questionable combinations. Memorable shipments: lube plus dill pickle dough plus baby Einstein video, 6 bottles of laxatives plus adult diapers. Anytime someone orders Thai Escorts 101, what you must know about escorts before coming to Thailand. Don't ever think that buying something online means that you escape the judgment of others. They can't send us all to detention. Story 1. March 20th, 2003. I was a foreign exchange student in Germany as a 7th grader. Germany as a whole was extremely against Bush starting a war with Iraq. So in early March, it started to circulate the school that if the war would in fact start, everyone would walk out in protest. March 20th came, and the 11th and 12th graders sounded the alarm. The entire school streamed out in a gigantic mob. They tried to lock us in, but it turns out that you really can't prevent 500 kids and teenagers from going somewhere. So doors were forcibly held open, and people jumped from the first-story windows. Everyone took the public transportation to the middle of the city, where our school met up with 3 other school bodies, and we marched through the streets. I remember my class was supposed to have music that day, so we all got our recorders out and blew them as loudly and off-key as possible. As an American foreign exchange student, it was definitely a bit awkward to be ditching school to protest my own country, but I definitely didn't want to make myself a social outcast by being one of the only ones to stay behind. And I was personally also against the war, so I got over that pretty quickly and enjoyed the adventure and a day without classes. The protest was over 2 or 3 hours later, and everyone just went home, even though school was long from over. The next day, a few teachers gave us lectures, but that was the extent of it. Who knows, maybe the instigators got bigger punishments, but us little 7th graders were left alone. That was the first time in my life that I ever protested something, and it was honestly extremely empowering, even as a foreign exchange student protesting my own country. Story 2. At around 15, I discovered the greatest implement of mischief I could bring to school was a Phillips head screwdriver. After spending a productive morning taking the screws out of everything I could find, notice boards, toilet cubicles, etc., I decided it was time to move up to dismantling the desks. There was one kid always the last into class, so I duly whipped out all the screws holding his desk together, leaving them hanging by just a hair, half a thread just enough to stop it collapsing under its own weight. Teachers are already there. In he comes and crashes to the ground in a pile of metal and timber. Mass hilarity ensues. Happy with the outcome and with the support of my peers, I spent my lunch break doing all the desks in the room we'd be in for the next class. Teacher comes in and sits down. I left hers alone. We all file in straight-faced and all come crashing down. She seemed to not be too fazed by the Monty Python-like scene unfolding in front of her, people shouting indignantly, "This place is falling apart," etc. Gave us 15 minutes to sort this mess out, and having checked her own chair for structural rigidity, carried on with the class, but kept us back 15 minutes to make up for lost time. Funniest thing about this for me is that they refer to the bathroom stall as a toilet cubicle. That really paints the picture of people using the restroom to do their business. Actually, when we moved into our house, which was built in the 60s, it had an old phone jack outlet right next to one of the toilets. So I guess back in the day, people would literally conduct business while doing their business. Seems strange to me, but I know nowadays everyone's still on their phone in the bathroom, but rarely do I actually hear people chatting it up while in the loo. Story 3. Normal reporting time was 7+, but on every Thursday there would be a free block or a study block for the first 2 hours of school. This was the case for everyone. The school policy was that on Thursday, you just had to mark your attendance by 9+, which was done by scanning a card. Then the loco discipline mistress quietly changed that rule on some semi-hidden corner of the permanently glitchy school website with no announcements made to the school. Now the secret rule was that you had to show up by 7 on Thursdays like any other day. Anyway, that Thursday came and like half the school ended up 2 hours late. That's more than 200 people. Everyone was thinking, well, this can't mean anything. What are they going to do? Send all 200 of us to detention? Logistically, they couldn't, so they did something way crazier. They gave half the school a mark on the permanent record. For context, you usually have to be late a few times to get a warning, and then late a few more times to get detention, and then get detention a few times to get a permanent mark. That day, this discipline mistress decided, nope, half the school will get a permanent mark, even if it's their first offense. Story 4. 3 minutes after the buzzer signaling the start of class, my biology teacher would lock the classroom door so that people who arrived late couldn't sneak in. If you arrived after 3 minutes, you would have to wait in the corridor until he decided you had suffered enough shame. One day, we all turned up to class on time, and the door is unlocked, so we go in and sit down. There is no sign of the teacher, so we wait. After 5 minutes, he still has not turned up, so someone decides to turn the tables. We all decide this would be hilarious, so one of the boys locks the door, and we just sit around and chat. The teacher turns up a couple of minutes later and tries to get in, but cannot, and starts knocking on the door, telling the boys to unlock it. They refuse, and he goes to the security office to get another key. The boys then unlock the door, and the teacher returns. We were expecting him to get really angry, but fortunately he saw the funny side of it, laughed it off, and he never locked the classroom door again. Having studied math in college and gone through a slew of various math professors, I would say this seems pretty accurate. Of course, you can't generalize, but I think statistically there probably is a decent correlation between mathematicians and insanity. And I've certainly felt that I fit that mold sometimes. Although math is universal, in two senses of the word really, it's a ubiquitously adopted language, but also is used to interpret the universe itself and the various relationships within it. I felt that when I delved too deep into the pure mathematics and thought too much about the abstractness of it all, I got a bit existential and went a little insane. For me at least, I found that I need to balance it with things that ground me in reality in order to stay happy. Story 6. It wasn't a school story, it was an army story. I was in basic training at Fort Jackson over the fall months. It was October 31st, and we were just a couple weeks from graduation. Every night, we are supposed to line up in front of our beds with our toes touching a piece of white tape that runs down the length of the bay. It's called Toe the Line. They do a bed check and make sure everyone is there, then turn out the lights to go to bed. So that night, a few of us got together and decided to wear our bed sheets during Toe the Line instead of our physical training uniforms. We called it Toga the Line. 2 dudes, Anderson and Blargsnarf, were a couple of older guys in our platoon, dang near 30 years old, both of them. They refused to go along. We explained to them that if we were all doing the wrong thing together, then no one would get in trouble. They still refused. So 28 of us lined up in togas, and 2 guys lined up in the proper uniform. The drill sergeant comes in looking down at his clipboard and not paying attention to us and just starts calling out names. About 5 names in, he glances up, looks at all of us, and yells, "What the frick is going on here?" The 2 guys not in togas get this smug look while shaking their heads at us. Then the drill sergeant turns and looks at those 2 guys and says, "I said, what the frick is going on here? Why aren't you 2 mofos in uniform? Front-leaning, rest position, go." They get down to do push-ups, and the rest of us jump down with them. The drill sergeant says, "What the frick are the rest of you doing in the front-leaning rest position?" We yelled, "If they go down, we go down." I thought that drill sergeant was going to cry for a moment. The only thing I miss about the Army is the camaraderie. Story 7. In my second year of high school, I and another kid got sent to discipline for roughhousing in PE class. I was sent home for the day and assumed the same happened to the other kid, skipped school the next day for an extracurricular event, and when I came back the following day, I was called in for a disciplinary meeting. Apparently, they gave the other kid a 3-day suspension, so the following day the rest of the PE class decided to march into the administration offices and protest the unfair punishment of the other guy. So the principal decided I skipped school because I knew about the protest. So I got punished again. Kudos to the other 50-plus kids that somehow got away with it. forced the school to enforce an even stupider policy of punishing someone getting beaten up equally to the kid doing the beating. Too long, didn't read, skipped school, and missed a class-wide protest, and was the only one to get punished for it. Story 8. At my high school, we had trailers way at the far end of campus that some classes were in. I had a math class in one of these trailers with a very strict and maybe a little insane teacher. As soon as the tardy bell rang, he locked the classroom door and wouldn't let anyone into his room without a tardy pass from the office. Anyway, one day this huge fight broke out on campus, which blocked one of the main exits that led to the trailers. A tardy bell rang before anyone in our class got to the trailer. We all waited until he opened his door, announced no one would be let in without a tardy pass, and sent the entire class to the office. When an entire class of kids walked into the office to explain what happened, they just rolled their eyes, and the vice principal walked us back to class and told our teacher that he had to let us in. Story 9. In 11th grade, my gym teacher had the high school change uniform rules so that none of the girls past 10th grade could wear shorts at all during PE, no matter the length. It wouldn't have been so frustrating if the teacher herself hadn't worn booty shorts and was never told to cover up because she was leading the married principal around by his dong. So all of us in my grade that had gym wore pants the next day, but refused to do anything except sit on the floor the entire period. The principal was called and threatened us all with in-school suspension, but we kept sitting and ignored him. We repeated it for 2 more days before they let us wear shorts again. Another teacher had called the school board, and the school board was like, just let them wear shorts. It's PE class. It's lame, but it's all I got. Story 10. Every quarter, the middle school gym class was forced to run a few miles for their physical exam. When the dreaded day arrived, we all decided to rebel and plotted with the history teacher. A few years ago, the gym teacher had kidnapped her entire class for a field trip to the pool, so she was thirsty for revenge. She took us to her classroom, locked us in there, and let us bunker down underneath the desks. For the entire period, the gym teacher was running all over the place. Through the windows, we could see him shuffling around in confusion and even went on the PA system to order us out. But nope, we sat there until the bell rang and hid from him for the rest of the day. But we had to run an extra mile anyway. Funny how running a single mile is so dreaded, at least in most U.S. schools. I don't know if that says how lazy and unfit we are, or if it's not so much the running itself, but the social dynamic of the pressure to perform amidst all your peers and crushes and all that. Because I'd imagine most kids, even who aren't athletes, could finish in under 10 minutes or so, and that's not a whole lot of suffering at all. But then being picked on for being slow or feeling embarrassed on where you fall in the ranking, I can see that being the more prominent issue. But all good life lessons for kids to learn anyway. Story 11. When I was in junior high school, probably about 1968 to 1970, female students were not allowed to wear jeans or pants of any type, skirts and dresses only. And this was public school. If you did try to wear pants, you would be sent home to change clothes. One day, a large group of us decided to all wear pants and see what happened. About 60 girls all wore slacks. Not even jeans, but nice slacks. To class, and they made us all sit in the hallways until they figured out what to do. We had to sit in the school auditorium all day, but the whole thing started a dialogue with the school district, and the next year, we could wear pants to class. A year after that, we could wear jeans. Story 12. In high school, we had a big tradition of wearing costumes on the Friday of Halloween. My senior year, they banned costumes and said that any students found will get a detention. I said screw it, and I went as my GTA 5 character, a cowboy with a thick Russian accent. By the way, I'm Russian, and I live in the rural U.S. A friend went as Marty McFly. Long story short, everyone went with normal clothes as costumes. A list of outfits were Axe Red Rummer, Fighter Pilot, Greaser, Doo-Wop Girl with the Greaser, Motorcycle Rider, Gangster, some character from American Horror Story, Jason Brody with tattoo, and more. Nobody got a detention. One jerkwad teacher tried, but we argued this is what we always wear. True for Marty McFly. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.